Streeter-Childress is a playwright, actor, teaching artist, singer, director, and the founder and artistic director of Building Better People Productions. Her 31 years in professional theater includes performances at the Kennedy Center, Arena Stage and Adventure Theater, and teaching at institutions including the Folger Shakespeare Library, Everyman Theater, and Baltimore School for the Arts. She also co-hosts the podcast, Fine Beats and Cheeses, with her twin sister, Leslie Gray Streeter. Booklist Review called the book a romp that plumbs emotional depths and family ties and what we sacrifice to follow our dreams. Streeter's debut novel is a winner. And New York Times bestselling author Jen Lancaster wrote, "Family and Other Calamities is vintage Leslie Gray Streeter, hilariously funny and with a powerful emotional punch. It's a deep study in the gifts we get from the people we love the most, even when we don't always like them." It is my great pleasure to welcome Leslie Gray Streeter and Lynn Streeter-Childress.
Thank you. And just in case you're wondering, I'm wearing this because overnight I developed I tested negative for COVID. I'm fine. But I don't want to, it's unsightly to sneeze on people. So it's not as important.
No one cares. No, and I was gonna say it's funny. Well, first I'm gonna say this. Leslie and I are twins, and we talk to each other at least 3 times a day. And it's funny that anyone wants to pay or be here to hear us talk to each other. It's hilarious. And also, I got notes, so the things that we were saying will actually make sense to other people and not just to us. Because
although we will find it hilarious.
Exactly, so it won't just be us on the phone. But thank you so much for coming. One, I did write down, it's funny that in the review they said it was vintage Leslie Streeter, which is hilarious that people know her well enough because she's so awesome that she has a vintage. It's something to compare her to.
It's wild.
And I was going to say this too. So when Black Widow, which was her first book, debuted, yay! In 2020, you also had a cough at the debut of it, which was moderated by somebody better,
James
by
Patterson.
James Patterson.
Yeah.
And yes, and so you coughed. Do you remember this?
I do.
You coughed and said, "Oh, but I don't have COVID." So it's just funny that that this is exactly history repeating itself.
It is.
Again, so before we start, I just want to say we are Baltimore natives, and woo. And what is it like to be here at the Pratt?
It's wild.
Can you talk about our relationship with the Pratt Library as a thing, and also like being here?
Absolutely. So we grew up in Northwood. We grew up like 6 blocks, maybe 5 blocks from the Northwood branch on Raven Boulevard. And so that was our place that we would go. They just gave our kids some summer reading. When we were little, we would read all the summer reading in about a week and come back and say, "Hi, can we have more books?" They're like, "What?" So that was just the center of our learning to love reading. And this particular building was where you came. Picture it, Sicily. No, picture it, no internet. And the book that everyone in the city, or your school at least, had to read, there was like 2 of them. And you waited till the last minute, and we would go to Northwood and go, "Do y'all have this book?" They go, "No." And so we took what was then the number 3 up and down the street. So we were like, well, we'll figure it out. We would come down here and be like, please, 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 please.
And the 3 let off right in front of the building.
Right in front of the building. And it felt like in 1998, I guess, when Titanic came out on video at Blockbuster, and everybody was waiting for Titanic, and you would like, "No, I'll wait." They're like, "We don't have any." There's like 80 people waiting. "No, I will wait for this book." So don't do that, kids. Don't procrastinate. But no, this place has been, first of all, I love old buildings. I love history. I love the place that, as a writer, that a library plays in people just everywhere, because they have not just books. It used to be videos. It's Wi-Fi. It's programs. It's lectures like this, and for free. And so we need that. I'll just say more than ever now, we need light, we need education, and we need it to be free and accessible to everybody. So
Right. You talked about Wi-Fi. People can use the computers and look for jobs.
Yep.
It's places where unhoused people can go and be someplace.
someplace.
Their libraries are miracles, and librarians, I think, are miracle workers, and it's very, very, very exciting to be here. We're also, yeah, thank you. So also impressed that there are people here more than our family and friends, which is exciting, but we're so happy that you are all here. And I keep looking at my friends who've been friends of ours for our whole lives, some who've been friends for 30 years, some who knew
Did you
us
see Andrew?
before we knew us. Yeah, I saw Andrew. So Andrew Wallen is back there, and he was we went to City. He went to City, and he was my ring dance date, my junior ring dance. Yeah, Andrew is back there. Yay. Those pictures are somewhere. Exactly, everyone just clapping.
Also, if I can just drop a note, Andrew is on a new journey where he has opened a school of rock in Pikesville. He took a leap of faith. He was a therapist. He decided he was going to go in a different
And an author.
direction that made him happy, and I'm going to be writing about it later. And Brooks is going to be going to School of Rock for 90s week. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for coming. He's a cool dude.
All right. So we talked a little bit, and they mentioned Black Widow, and I talked about it. Can you tell us, even we're here for Family and Other Calamities, can you tell us a little about Black Widow?
Black Widow was my first book. It was a memoir, meaning it was like well, y'all know this, but biography is like everything that ever happened in your life, and that's not really that interesting. But it was with some flashbacks about the year between my husband dying in 2015 and the next year where our son's adoption became final, so which was almost exactly a year. So in that, I talk about the terrible things that happened. I talk about how we met each other. I talk about things like Baltimore and race and religion. He was a white Jewish dude. I talk about just how people don't know how to talk about grief, so they say really dumb things to you, or people. I know everyone, unfortunately, in this room has lost somebody, and everyone has been in a moment where they were pressed into service of helping somebody else through their grief. Like somebody coming to you going, "Oh my God, I miss him so much," and you're like, "Okay, me too." And it's like you don't know what to do about that. So that book was the book that I wish I had to read before, and so I wrote it. It's a book that's about, I hope, the messy stuff in the middle, and not just like, and this ended and it's wonderful and there's 5 steps and it's so cool, and it's not cool. But you have to get through it to know what it is. My uncle, who is not here, but his beautiful wife Bridget is.
He is here.
Oh, is he? I didn't.
He's
oh,
there,
there
yeah.
you are. Do you remember what you said to me when my dad died? Well, you said lots of things, but his dad had died the year before, less than a year before, and he said, "You will get through this, but you will never get over it." And he's a very wise man, Reverend Lester James Jr. Also named after him. So there was the late Reverend Lester, then this Reverend Lester, and then me. And we were at dinner once, and someone goes, "Les," and we all went, "Yes." And Bridget goes, "Oh no, there's 3 of them." Like, yes.
Yeah. And so that book came out a week before lockdown.
Yeah.
In 2020. And so like you had a plan for that book,
There was a plan.
a tour, and then all of that went away.
Wah, wah, wah.
Wah, wah, wah. But a thing happened where it became something else. Can you talk about that?
I wrote about grief, like losing someone grief. But during the beginning of the pandemic, people were grieving everything, or grieving both, maybe people who got sick. They were also grieving the way that their lives used to be, and that we weren't getting that back. They were grieving a way of living and ease and all that kind of stuff. So many people wrote me and said, "I found this book." Some people were like, "Why is a book about grief funny?" And I was like, "Have you never been to a funeral where something stupid happened and you laughed because it was the thing that got you through that moment?" They went, "Yeah, we have so many dumb stories I'm not going to tell, but."
And these people over here know them.
They were
a
there.
lot of them, exactly.
Chicken family.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, really short.
Let's go tell it.
So we have a cousin. She's my grandmother's first cousin, and her nickname was Chick. And she sent flowers to the funeral of one of our great aunts. And but they, instead of writing it from Chick and family, the florist wrote it's from the chicken family. Exactly. So that's been for 30, 40 years now.
And
That's
we
been
would
a joke.
walk around like Baptist funerals. I say like the body does a couple shows. There was the night before, and then there's the viewing.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we were like just getting used to the fact that this aunt had was not with us, and we're like trying not to look at the body. And so Chicken Family was hilarious. Like somebody would laugh and they run back to the pews, try not to look crazy, and go look at that, look at that, look at that.
Exactly.
And that got us through that terrible moment because it was funny. It was stupid, but it was really funny.
It was funny, and it was funny. You became a member of the grief community as somebody who needed a community of grievers, but you also became part of a community of people who talked and spoke about grief. And so this is not going to be a linear conversation. I'm sorry. So we're going to be sort of jumping places because this book has an aspect of grief to it as well. And so one thing I was going to ask, so Black Widow happened, then you started the process of getting, of writing this published. Why going from memoir to novel?
I have more to say, and I'll be very honest. I have more memoir in me, but it didn't sell well. So no one was going to give me a contract for more about me when enough people had not read about me in the beginning. So I was like, okay, we got it. But they still wanted it. So different publisher. But it's weird as a journalist. You're not supposed to make up stories. Some people do, and that's terrible. Don't do that. But it was odd, the experience of making up an ending, even though some of it is based in things that are familiar. Black lady journalist, Jewish husband, death, Baltimore, and then it veers wildly into another thing. But they say write what you know, and people I'm related to go, is that about me? My mother goes, is this us? I'm like, no, it's not.
Someone said the difference is, the sibling thing. I'm like, oh, I'm not the sister in this book. We're going to talk about some of the things that are like drawn from life, and that was our question too. Is how do you approach writing a story that is familiar but is an autobiography, and how do you make it something that's different, but also draw on things that have actually happened?
Well, I had, like I said, the basic foundation, and I went, how wacky can I take this? And my editor at first was like, because she doesn't know me, so she doesn't know that I tend to be wacky. I tend to go, woohoo, my humor is very whatever, and it's very pop culture centric. It's very referential. One of the reviews said the ending was cute, but it was just too convenient. It's like everything wrapped up like an episode of Scooby-Doo. And I said, yes, I'm Gen X. That's what we do. That like everybody is there. Everyone's there. It's like Columbo. It's like Death in Paradise. It's
Right.
like,
And you know, Death in Paradise on BritBox, where they gather everybody at the end. Go get everyone. And then they go through, we thought it was you, Myrtle. But no, it wasn't you.
it wasn't you, Tony.
No. Hortense. And Hortense goes,
It's
what are you
always-
talking about?
Yes.
Exactly.
And then there's a thing, and they take Hortense away, and she goes, I never meant to hurt anybody, and nobody cares, and whatever. So that's basically what I wrote, because I thought it was funny. And because I do write, as a pop culture writer, I wrote it like a movie. There was a movie in my head. You can tell, the dialogue is very crisp. There's a lot of dialogue. There's enough exposition to get it to whatever. So that was really, like, not taking it too far. They had me take all of the curse words out, which those who know me will be like, what? And my grandmother, who's no longer with us, who did not, I said, what did you think of the first book? And she said, I did enjoy the language, but it was really good. And I went, okay. So they said, if you have no cursing, then more people, it was almost a joke. It's like, can I have one this? And what? No, just take them all. Like, I can't like barter for, can I get an F? Can I get a, no, they're like, no. So, and it didn't hurt the book anything. It's because then I had to like not lean on those words. But yeah, there was
Language.
yes,
Exactly.
language. When everybody shows up, well, I'm not gonna say it. What happens? But there is a scene where people show up, and people like that would never happen. I'm like, nothing in this would ever happen. Some of it would happen, and some of it wouldn't. That's fiction.
Exactly. How many of you have read the book? Have any of you? Okay, yay. Okay, cool. So also too, I'm trying not to like give away stuff. Like we're gonna talk about the book, but not like give away pertinent plot points. That was a lot of P's. I didn't plan that way. Okay, I said plan. That was another P word.
Oh,
Sorry.
Lord.
Okay. Anyway, so you are not Dawn,
No,
and I am not Tanya,
no.
who is the sister. So just putting it out there. w- I thought this was funny too. So Leslie and I are twins. We are only siblings, and in the book, this is a goofy question. So Dawn has a sister, but they're not twins.
Yes.
Did you have to think about what it was to have a sibling that's not the same age
Yeah, it
as
was
you?
weird.
Because we don't know that experience for ourselves, and there are so we both have only children, and you know, we'd be like, I'm bored. I'm like, talk to. Oh no, you don't have someone to talk to. Because we always had built-in best friends. It's like better than a built-in
And then we
bookshelf.
had Nikki.
Exactly. Then we had Nikki, who is here.
Yeah.
Literally, we've known Nikki our entire lives. Our parents were best friends, and she's 15 days older than us. So literally, besides our family and each other, we've known Nikki the longest of all the people. Backtracking a little bit.
Do your
So thank you. So this is based in Baltimore. Um, Baltimore is a character in the book. Can you talk about that? Even Black Widow, because when you
Yes.
wrote it, you weren't necessarily planning on moving back here.
No, not at all.
Okay.
We were. When I first started writing it, no. By the time it came out, we had already we had a realtor. We were looking, and then that sped up that process a lot, because everything shut down, and my son was in kindergarten at the time, left for spring break, and never went back to school. So I was like, we have to go because we have to find a house ideally before the next school year starts. If it started in our living room, because that was the lockdown year. But yeah, I wanted to write about my Baltimore. The Wire is not my Baltimore. It is not the only.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes.
It is not definitive of Baltimore. It is definitive of that part of Baltimore, which is very true and very poignant. But now everyone thinks that that's what Baltimore is because people are like, well, I don't know. Literally, I had people, I had a friend who was like, you're moving back. That terrible place. I'm like, yeah, because you're from Jersey. No one ever gets shot in Jersey. Slightly defensive, yeah. So I wanted, right. I wanted to write about a place like where we grew up in Northwood, where almost everyone owns homes. If they were not, they were like longer term renters. There were a lot of people who'd gone to Morgan, like my parents had. There were people who almost
Parents.
everybody was black, except for the people who eventually moved here. By the time we went to elementary school, I think pretty much everybody. Oh, so sorry. Was black. And that's important because there's so many people who've never had that experience of everyone that so it's weird to them. And so like, well, where's the drug dealers? And not there. Around, I said we were hood adjacent. Like you could see next to the library, if you went around the corner to Cold Spring Lane and kept walking, there was a Chinese food place that had a Lazy Susan with bulletproof glass, and chicken wings. So yeah, we were like, you could kind of see the hood, but we didn't live in the hood, and the hood did a good job of not really in, encroaching on where we were. Oh, sorry. Whoops.
Thank you. Okay.
And even though I have a sore throat, I'm still really loud, so we're good. I wanted to introduce not only people who were not from here. At first, it was like that. Then I was like, forget about them. They're going to think what they think. I want to write for us. I wanted to write a book about what we experience, what it's like to be a well-educated person who, well, we used to have a lot of government jobs. I'm not going into that. But at the time of the writing of the book, a lot of government jobs, and to be in a city that has so many colleges and universities, and to be in a place where you are very close to a lot of things. And I want to write about our city. A lot of people write about the county, or like, yeah, I grew up a John Waters fan. You know, he wrote about a place that I did not live. I live near a Highland town now, but that's not my Highland town. It is now mostly Latino.
Well, I was going to say too, you talked about Baltimore not being The Wire. Baltimore is also not. She's just not that into you. And anyone ever see She's Not That? She's Not
I
That Into You?
hate that
Okay,
movie.
it's a movie about Baltimore with no black people in it. It is no black people. Like you barely like. There may have been some like in the back, and the only
Shangela.
Okay, yeah, Shangela, right, and but they were so Shangela or a comedy duo, 2 black women, but their scenes weren't with everybody else. It was a lot of they would like talk to people, like interview stuff, like about
Like
people
early
breaking
Sex
up
and the
with
City,
you,
they
and,
would like first,
right, but they weren't
modelizers.
even in it, and the only even LGBTQIA characters were the ones who worked with Drew Barrymore
At the
the Blade, and so everyone was straight.
And they were gassing her up,
Right, they were the quirky best friend, and so everybody was straight and
There are
white.
a couple of non-white people in that group, still not black.
Right, and so one of the things that you talk about in this book, you talk about Northwood, is gentrification, and being fully so in the 80s. So us Gen X people, there were segregation, but as far as like pop culture things went, a lot of black kids and white kids sort of knew the same things. We didn't have
MTV was a great common denominator.
right, exactly. And so there were the R&B stations and there were the pop stations, but they were next to each other on the dial. V103 was right next to B104,
which was near WQSR, which was the oldie station, which is why I fell in love with the Four Seasons.
Right.
Which is why the song is named Dawn. Dawn, go away, I'm not good for you. Because I fell in love because it's all drama and you love me, but you shouldn't love me. You were rich and I am poor. And I was like, ooh, drama.
So actually that sort of goes into it. So Dawn and this character originally predated other things. So when you thought of this idea about Dawn, how long ago? About a book about a character named Dawn.
Well, it was a screenplay about a character named Dawn. It was 31 years ago. I wrote a screenplay because I thought I was going to go to film school. So I was working at a black community weekly newspaper in Miami. And before I got the job in New York, which would bring me back up close to here, I started writing a screenplay. And that's before the internet. So you could basically go in the back of Premiere Magazine, which doesn't exist anymore, and send away for a screenplay. And I picked Some Kind of Wonderful, the John Hughes movie, because I loved it, and I thought, it wasn't copying it, but it was like, it was musical, and it was like drama-like, and obviously the screenplays are always different than the finished movie. So I, noted that as I was writing it. I wrote it, literally, I bought like 4 or 5 spiral notebooks because I didn't have a computer, and I wrote it longhand. And I have no idea where that is, but I couldn't tell you. But back when I started pitching a novel, I thought, well, maybe she's Dawn. Maybe the band went on to be 90s pop stars, but she quit because she hated them and Joe right before they got famous. They got famous, and they tried to get back together without telling her, but they really couldn't because she comes back with the ashes, whatever. So that I pitched it, and they said, well, it's good, but it reminds us of Daisy Jones and the Six, a band coming back together, whatever. It's like, fine. And they said, what else do you know? I go, journalism, I know that. I can do that. And then I had to go to people that were going to recognize, like, the description of newsrooms and that kind of thing and go, this is not about you. But it is about a newsroom in New York. It is about a racist receptionist who existed. I did not name her that, but yes, she was real. Nobody has reached out and said, that's my grandmother. So Because why would you tell me that? So
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I think I'm good. And I wrote about like she comes in the newsroom and they've tried to paint over a spot in the stairwell to go to the downstairs where there's a dent from someone's forehead, and there was a drunk dude I worked with who was drinking in the parking lot in the newsroom after hours, and he tripped and hit his head, and the crack is still there. Was still there, and in the book it's still there because the newsroom is no longer a thing, but it was still there when I last time I went up was when it was still there was when I got married. So it was 2010, so it had survived.
The dent had
The
survived.
dent had survived.
Long live the dent.
Dent. Yes.
No, that's funny. Okay, so the parallels between you, Dawn is a like you said a baby journalist from Baltimore who goes to University of Maryland, right? College Park. That tracks.
It does.
That you moved to. She goes to York. You're slightly different. You went to Miami. You were offered the job in York
The day that I moved to Miami.
because our parents had moved there and we didn't have jobs, and we were like, great.
And my dad's like, they're not really gonna move. They're gonna stay up there with their friends. My mother was like, they have no job, and they have free in Miami, free, and it changed our lives. There's people in this room we would not know if we had not gone to Miami.
Yeah, it was a good. It was a good thing. It was a good
very
thing.
good year. Yeah.
It was, and so yay, Miami friends. And that you went south to go back north,
But
and
I overshot Baltimore by like an hour.
exactly, and wound up in York. And there is one thing, the sister in the book who is not me, but drives up and down. I lived with family in the DC area, and I would go about an hour and a half, and I would do that trip up and down. I was going to ask you, there's a part in the book where Dawn, it goes back and forth between 1994, right, and 2019,
2023.
2023.
Yes.
And you talk about a terrible apartment in York. Which terrible apartment was this based on?
This was the hallway. Nikki knows the hallway. The hallway was on, what was it? I can't remember the name of the street. Started with an R. It was on the third floor
Richland.
walk up. Richland, thank you. And it was like a lot of old houses cut up into apartments. So they cut up really awkward. Basically, it's like whatever side of the stairs you were, that was your apartment. So it was a big living room, a hallway so narrow we were concerned that people might not be able to get through it. Nice kitchen. Well, it was a big kitchen.
It's a
and
big
then there
kitchen.
was a patio outside, and then it went down to the steps that went down to the backyard, which was really good for parties. You know, it was my first real apartment. I'd had a studio before that, but it was my first real apartment that like had separate rooms. You know, you could actually throw your stuff in the thing so nobody could see your shoes. But it was $500 a month in 1995.
God bless the 90s.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is twice your first place, which was like $250.
250 was like a room. Yes. And also, that was the first time that I've ever been told I had an attitude. We know what that's about, because he wasn't giving me my deposit back. And I go, sir, I am very poor. I would like my $250, please. And it's always, he didn't call me back. Was always, once again, no cell phone. And finally, I left like several messages and said, I'm gonna need my $250. He goes, you have an attitude problem. I said, yes, I do. And I don't. I'm just a black woman who asked him for something he didn't want. So what? Thank you. There you go.
One of the things that you talk about, that we've talked about in conversation, and you've talked about when you've talked about this book, is that it is a Gen X
Yes.
book, and it is a book that features a protagonist in her 50s.
Yes. Very important to me.
And that as we are, and you don't see a lot of that. Even a lot of stuff that's about Gen X is
Unless it's a Tyler Perry struggle love
right.
show, or when my mother and I just watched Straw, which was
Taraji, right?
better than I thought. Still, everything bad in the world happens to this single black mother.
Right.
Like, and then things you don't even realize have happened until toward the end. And I'm like, just once, can there be a movie or a book and there's lot more books than there are movies
Right.
about a person whose life is not, the story is not about struggle. It's about grief and pain, but she's had some time to do a little healing, and she's not struggling financially, and
Right.
she's not she has family support even though they're not always good to each other. This Taraji character in this movie has no support,
Yeah.
and everyone is against her, to the point where it also almost seems like Penelope Pit Stop or something, where the guy is twirling his mustache. For younger people, that's a reference to a 60s show, the cartoon that was about basically a girl who got tied to railroad tracks.
Every episode.
That was her personality.
Well, yeah, that's your personality. But so not just Gen X, but Gen X that happens in her 50s. It wasn't everything wasn't look at us in the 80s and the 90s, right? It was, we loved like reality bites and all of those things, but it's also a Black book. It's a
Yes.
book about Black people and about that experience. Other thing I thought about, I don't know how many of you saw the 4 seasons series that was just
On Netflix.
on Netflix. It was
The remake of the Alan Alda movie from 1980, I think.
something like that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's excellent.
And because
it's-
it's very Gen X.
It's excellent. But there's one Black friend.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was hilarious. It was Coleman
Coleman
Domingo.
Domingo, so-
Love Coleman Domingo. But this book,
And he's also the only friend in that group who is gay.
right.
So his boyfriend, who they tend to ignore the significant others,
Right.
because they're just focused on their core group, and they kind of show up and they kind of expect them to.
Right.
Yeah.
This book, I was reading your book around the same time that 4 Seasons was out and what came out, and I binged that. I binged your book and I binged 4 Seasons. And but it reminded me though that book just felt, that movie, the miniseries felt very real. And
Of course, they can afford to go on 4 major vacations in the same year.
yes,
What?
wild. And so it's 8 episodes, 2 episodes per season.
Yes.
But I was reading this. There's something about telling that story from the perspective of a Black person, not the Black friend in the group, right?
But this is her book.
This is her book, and that's her story. And also too, we like Leslie said, listen to a lot. We listen to podcasts. We have a podcast. Find Beats and Cheeses. Find it.
Oh, look who's here.
Oh, our producer.
It's producer Sam.
Producer Sam. If you listen to our podcast, that's producer Sam, right there. But a lot of times we listen to things about the 80s and 90s, but a lot of them are talked about by millennials, which is great.
Because
but
they had their place.
exactly. We all experience it. Like, we experience things in middle school that people 10, 15 years older than us
Our aunt Tim is 9 years older than us, so it's the same kind of
age thing. But we would listen to a lot of things about 90s music, and they'd be like, when I was in middle school, which is great, but our experience of, we were in our 20s with jobs and bills and stuff, and there's something about being able to look at things based on what you were going through, because that makes a big difference about what you were going through when that thing came out. John Hughes movies mean one thing maybe to people who were in high school. We were in 8th grade when Breakfast Club came out, and then we all can also look back now and see things differently about problematic things that were in those movies.
I was like, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Okay, so was it your party or your friend Paula's party? It was a Halloween party in
It was Paula's party.
Paula's party. Okay, so this is the thing about loving the 80s without doing blackface. So buckle in. So I love Molly Ringwald, who I got to meet several years later. She was great. So I decided to be Molly Ringwald. So what I did was I bought a red wig and a hat I already had and a pink dress I probably bought for $10 at a thrift store, because when you're young and skinny, you can always walk into a place and buy a thing. And little white ankle socks with lace on them. And I walked in, and the guy who was the DJ, started playing "If You Leave," the theme from Pretty in Pink, because he knew I was supposed to be, and because it was a Halloween party, and I didn't have to change my face. I didn't have to, and also was about the shared experience of being involved in something that wasn't necessarily made for you, but experiencing it your way without having to make it dumb. So nobody has to. If you dress like Beyonce, there's a years ago, maybe 8, 9 years ago, the picture of a white family who dressed as the family from Coming to America, and they didn't change. They were white. They didn't change their faces at all. They just, you knew, with like King Joffrey Joffer and the big lion head on
Right.
him. It was very, and Queen Aeolian. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
You could tell who that was, and they didn't. I've seen Jay-Z's and Beyonce's. I've seen people. So just be a little creative, because it cheapens it for the rest of us if you do that. So there you go.
Hey, so we have about 10 minutes left in the you and me portion of this.
You and me, and all of the people.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so we talked about. Oh, okay. So talked about things coming full circle. There's a character in the book whose name is Bria James, who is a young journalist who's trying to. The basic thing about the book, right? We can say this is a young woman who's Dawn, who has a big story that she thinks that she's about to break,
and she has her own website. She's all digital. She's never worked for. Well, she has worked for a couple of print things, but she does her own thing.
Well, back in the 90s, a story gets stolen from her, and she meets who becomes her husband, and then leaves and goes to California, and who she thought was her friend has stolen the story, and eventually wrote a Pulitzer about it.
And I don't have a Pulitzer, but guess who does have a Pulitzer? The Baltimore Banner. Yes. Yes, we do. So once again, I had nothing to do with it. I was just there. But
you can claim it.
Pulitzer Prize-winning publication.
Exactly.
Yes.
Rock and roll.
It's good stuff.
So when she comes back, present day in the book, she's come back to bury the ashes of her husband, who's died 5 years earlier, right?
A year and a
3
half.
years. Oh, year and a half. Okay.
Yeah.
And
he just was not able to come.
Right, because of COVID stuff. And she's being. There turns out there's a movie version of the story, and they've written it where she is a thinly veiled villain in the story. And there is exactly. There is a young journalist who is trying to get the scoop. Yes. And Dawn finds her very annoying, but other people remark to her, she's you. Yeah.
She's millennial you. You were annoying too.
And you were her. And there's a part where she has a blog, and you're like, that's not real journalism. You say
that's
that
not
to
me.
But no,
Dawn.
you. I said you, the character who's not Leslie. But there were so many pieces that feel like Leslie, but it's not Leslie. It's not. Okay, so, but what she says to her, that's not real journalism, and it's basically like, we have to remember who we were.
Yeah, and she sounds super old and outdated. Like, if you heard someone say that, you wouldn't trust them. You wouldn't trust them to move journalism or data forward. You'd be like, that old antiquated dinosaur lady.
Right. And we have to remember, because I don't know if every generation goes through this, but I can say this for Gen X. We still think we're young, right? We are in our 50. Thank you, David Weinberg. We are in our 50s.
Look at how I dress.
Thank you. Exactly. And I love a sleeve. We are in our 50s, but it was funny when you look at people. I remember the first time being on a college campus, because for a while when we graduated in the 90s, you could still go to college campuses and people would still think that maybe you went there, that sort of between 22 and maybe like late 20s. But then you went someplace and you were 30 and everyone's like, oh, ma'am. You're like, ma'am, right? And you realize that you were not fooling anybody. Unless you're a student who went late, you are not 22. And everyone knows that you're not 22.
That's our mommy.
That's our mom. Yay, mommy. Woo! I was gonna do the thing that she does to us, and I was gonna say, "Is that my scarf?" But it's not my scarf. Exactly. Sorry. You're. No, I said, "Is that my scarf?" It's not my scarf, but it looks. I don't think it is. Whatevs. Okay, but um, it's interesting, Dawn, looking at somebody else who who she kind of used to be, but realizing that we are a moment, but no longer
The moment.
the moment, and that's hard, right?
Yeah, it is when you go. When I realized that I was past the age that you could be in like young professional groups, and you went, oh, I guess I'm not younger. And those like go to 40 sometimes. I mean,
We still
because
have.
particularly when everyone else who's affiliated is like 75, so you are relatively young. But I am no longer young in anybody's estimation at 54. So yeah, you age. I think every generation, like the baby boomers, there were so many of them, and they were like the young teenage whatever, and then they weren't. But there weren't that many of us. So I think we've seen a lot of our impact in retrospect.
And we're also literally the generation that gets forgotten. Like people will talk about, are you a boomer? Are you a millennial? Are you Gen Y? We're like, hello. Hello, we really totally get skipped, which is funny because that's really our personality is that nobody cares about us. So keep forgetting us so we have something to talk about and do.
Don't you forget about me? Yes.
No, thank you. Okay, it all comes
Sorry.
back to there.
It does.
So we have about 4 minutes left in this section, but I will talk about this. Dawn comes home,
Yes,
and you came home.
I did come home.
And what's that like? What's that been like?
When I came back, I the Baltimore Banner did not exist at the time, and the Sun was not hiring.
Well, and you were in York. You were in West Palm
West
Beach
Palm.
for
So-
18 years.
So I come back. I worked PR for like 6 months. I was not good at it. It was not a good thing. I was like ignoring my kid and my mom, who was my co-parent at the time, and I'm on the screen from like 8:30 in the morning until like 8 or 9 to get up and pee and go back and do whatever and talk to my child because we were all at the house, and it was writing in other people's voices is hard for me because I'm a very voicey writer. So they would go, you haven't gotten whatchamacallit's voice down. I was like, no, I didn't, because I don't want to do that. So but I was grateful to it because it taught me this isn't what I want to do, and it got me the money to buy a house along with my 401k. It's a whole thing. And so about that was 2021. So in 2022, I began to hear about 2021 rather, began to hear about this new publication that was coming up, and I knew people who knew people. And then in February, I got a phone call that said, "Hey, do you want to come?" I'm Kimmy Yoshino, the editor in chief of the Baltimore Banner. Would you like to come downtown? I was like, I don't move my car past 6 in Baltimore City, so I took an Uber, walked in, and thought, oh, this is really cool. And they just asked me, what do you want to write about? So the point of this is, I was away so long that I knew it was going to take me a long time to know how to write about Baltimore authentically as a person who lived here, not just a person who had gone. And that's just like, what is there around here now? And what does it feel like? And what is Baltimore then? Like Harbor Place, like that's not there. Like, what does that mean? And so by the time I got the job, it took a couple months for me to really kind of find my footing, but it just kind of happened. And now I feel like my job is to tell the story. There were not, that I grew up with in the 80s, any black columnists, female columnists. There were a couple of, like Gregory Kane, there were some
Leonard Pitts.
Leonard Pitts, one of my idols. Dave Barry, not black, not from Baltimore, but so funny. So I interviewed him once, and I said, I kind of stole your cadence. He goes, where's my check? Very big in Miami and everywhere. But I felt like I had been here long enough now to be worthy of Baltimore, and to be the steward of its story and of our story. And I'm so grateful for that. Every month I'm here, I feel like I'm more and more clued into how to do that. I don't always get it right, but I try really hard.
But that's life, right? It's what is right. It's about doing the best that you can at that moment.
Look, it is 3:45.
What? I know. Okay, so
We're in a variety show in our heads. Y'all don't know. It's like Dionne Warwick's going to show up and ask to. We're going to mention her Christmas song, and she'll go, "I couldn't possibly. Please sing it," and then the whole band would show up. That's the world that we live in.
and Andy Gibb was involved.
And
Yeah.
Andy Gibb was involved,
Right, exactly.
probably.
All right. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
And so now it is time for Q&A. So if you have a question, raise your hand like our wonderful gentleman here towards the back. I will point at you, and then you will say your question. So you, wonderful gentleman.
Mm. Ooh. I think it might be a emo rap version of "It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday." Because, One Sweet Day, something like that. Something that's so cliched as a Gen X grief song. But, like, there's this guy who does these series of reels, Fit Dad.
Oh yes.
And he goes, it's like he's talking to his wife, and he'll go, "We want the same diet. I don't know why you haven't lost any weight." And he goes, "Hey, wait." And then suddenly it's Mariah Carey and
Boys to Men.
Boyz II Men's "One Sweet Day" and a copy of his obituary.
Because she's killed him. Yes, exactly.
Because why would you say that? Yeah, so it helped being able to write about the journey, grief-wise, of someone that was not me but similar to me was helpful in understanding how different people. What if you weren't super close to your family, right? What if you? I lived very far from most of my family, but my mother moved in with us in a month and a half, so a month really. So it was different. The distance is different. Imagining processing grief in that way was very helpful because now I know how to inhabit other ways of grieving, other methods of grieving. I can't talk. Yes. I don't know what grieving is. So it's grieving, yes.
Yes.
Hi. Having a strong editor is the best part and the most crucial part of writing. So there were things that happened. There were parts of the book that are very what I wrote, and there's some things that Selena James, not Bria James, not the James family I'm related to, who is my editor, said, "What if you made this person a woman? What? What if Brian James is Bria James? Because there was going to be a flirtation. Bria is queer. Dawn is not. It was like because it becomes more interesting to have to deal with someone where there's not that frisson of sexual attraction, which just about dealing with her as a journalist. There was a lot of stuff, and so I think that holding strong to the structure that I had in my head, but also that kill your darlings thing about which means that sometimes if you write something you love it so much you have to if it's getting away of the rest of the book or the article or the column or whatever or the email moving forward, you have to kill it, you have to delete it. I would cut and paste it and put it in a Google Docs file just in case
Get back to it.
But yeah, having the guts to go, let me see how this goes, and learning. And as a fiction writer, it was really hard at first, but then I kind of got it. Yes.
I write for the band and every now and then.
Yes.
But we haven't really crossed.
No, hi.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading the book. When I came to Baltimore 13 years ago, I was amazed to discover that people who grew up in East Baltimore didn't know West and all that kind of stuff. And because I use a mobility system, I go all over the place. And people were amazed that I knew
Absolutely. 'Cause I live in, I'm not gonna say where I live. I just live away from there. I live more in more of a downtown situation, which is a place we used to go to work at Harbor Place and go to the movies. But that was pretty much
Come here.
and come here to save our sad, term paper or whatever. But it, one of my best friends is from Edmonton Village, but went to school for the arts down the street. So we would go to Edmonton Village to visit, or she would come, and it was like crossing the Nile. I can't believe I have to go so far to whatever. And so, also, I'll be very honest, the neighborhood where I live was not super welcoming to black people at the time. Those of you who are not from here would be shocked what Hamden was like in the 80s. They firebombed a black family's home so they wouldn't live there. So
We used to babysit for someone who lived in Hamden.
at the
And
edge of Roland Park.
at the edge of Roland Park, and literally across the street, you'd see white kids like looking at us like, "Yeah, don't come over here." I mean, like literally across the street
And we would
into
say
the
to
next
kid,
block.
yeah, we can't go to the park today.
Please. Mhm. Oh yeah. Right. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I have a question from our online audience, which is, do you plan to write more about Dawn in future stories or something totally new with a totally new character?
Yes. I'm writing something that is not about Dawn, but I have more Dawn stories. I really have Miss Vivi, the mysterious R&B diva. I have more story for her. But yeah, Dawn I think has more story to tell. I mean, it's like Bridgerton, like they focus on one character and then they come back and they focus on a different character, but you see them walking through the ball or whatever. That's where I am. Well, we have just pitched this to studios. We'll see what happens because then it gets optioned first, and then Black Widow got optioned, and for 5 years went back and forth. It never got made. No one bought it. But by the end of it, we had a script. I had a lot of money because they put money down. The option is basically kind of squatting, yeah, on the, I was trying to look for a more elegant word than squatting, but basically they have the option to make this piece something, and that never happened. I am hoping that Black Widow gains enough traction now because of this book that someone is interested in it. That's what I hope.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, sir, we don't know.
Yes.
So, I haven't read the book yet, but I understand Dawn is very similar to you. How did you decide, 2 questions. One is, how did you decide, what parts of yourself to bring to Dawn and what parts not to bring to Dawn? And the second part is there anything that you gave to Dawn that you wish that you had?
No, actually. I am very comfortable with the similarities, but like I said, I have very strong family support, and she had it, but like across the country, it wasn't the same. She is much more snarky than I am. She is much more. I think I pretty much remember how things happen. We all have our own version of the past, and I would call Lynn or Nikki or Sam and go, or my mom and go, what first with the first book. So how did this happen? Like, yeah, whatever. So, and then you figure out what to do. But in this book, it became very much about I got her to a place where I recognized her enough to be able to write her, and then I went, yeah. And I wanted to write a book about, because I was an interracial, interfaith relationship, and this book is not as much about this, but that exists because that's the longest relationship I was ever in. That's what I know to write about, and it was not a conflict in my family. There were some questions, but it was not like, I don't like you. It wasn't that. And nobody hates Dawn. They just don't particularly care for her because she's not what they expected. So, and that was not the case in my. I had other issues with my. There's some people whose family was parented with nothing to do with race or religion. I'll just leave that there.
Our last question is also going to come from our online audience, which is, what was your editing process like for your novel as opposed to your memoir? What was different, if anything?
Oh boy. Because there was some emotional distance from this, the editing process, both self-editing and having my editor from Lake Union Publishing, was that, well, the first one was a little brown. So I kind of like, you give it to these people and you hope they do something well with it. But it's like giving your baby away. I think a lot of journalists are good at that. They're good at editing. People who've never written journalism don't always appreciate editing because they're like, but every word of this is the most important thing. And James Patterson said to me, everyone doesn't care about what you want or think. I went, well, sir, and he's not wrong. So it's just like, he's very matter of fact in that. And he blurbed both books. Very nice guy. But yeah, I think that the process has been what part at any point I feel close to, and being to go, no, I can go away from this, and I can't take it personally when someone who has not lived my life does not understand it the way. There's a line where I refer to Joe, who is very good looking. It's a lot of references. I think someone pointed out, I called him who was it? No, something looking Muppet. Johnny Gill looking Muppet?
Yes.
Okay, because you Johnny Gill looking Muppet. So I also refer to him as the vampire Levert. And one of my editors said, did you mean Lestat? And I said, no, I did not. And so being able to say, and that's happened a lot when you have people younger than you or different culture than you, and because I was writing for us, right? I was writing for those who would get that. And I didn't, particularly the second book, I didn't lose a lot of that, which was really fun. I didn't feel like I was fighting so much. I felt like they trusted me. And I trusted myself.
Please help me thank today's moderator, Lynn Schroeder-Childress.
Thank you.
And today's author, Leslie Gray Street.
Okay, so we're going to sign books, but because I've been drinking this water so I don't cough on you, I need to go to the bathroom. So I will be right back.
We will do signing in just a couple moments. That gives everybody enough time to buy a book if you haven't already. And thank you for joining us.